Welcome to the Near Memo, a weekly conversation about search, social, and commerce. What happened, why it matters, and the implications for local. All right, here we are once again. Greg, Mike, David, for episode 17 of the Near Memo, and we do this on Fridays, and I've got to say TGIF today. It's just been a really long week for me, and I'm looking forward to a 3-day weekend. So anyway, Mike,
not such a long week for me, but I'm equally looking forward to the extra day. So
every day is a weekend for you, right, Mike?
Every day is a Wonders Day, but the long weekend is nice because tomorrow's raining. It means I get to go bike riding either Sunday or Monday with my wife, which I'm looking forward to.
All right.
My new mountain e-bikes is zooming up the hills. It's actually a blast. So if you've never tried it, come on by. You can try it. So.
If you live in Western New York, stay off the trails this weekend.
Get out of the way.
So my story, I'm kicking it off. My story is an article I recently wrote at Near Media called Confessions of a Local Guide. And it's just the history of a somewhat tainted history of my interaction with the local guide program and how I learned how to move through the program by finding the easiest way to upload a lot of photos and get a lot of views and achieve level 7 glory in the local guide program.
It has to be said, Mike, that you're like a secret spammer. I didn't know that about you before.
Oh, it's a great way to test Google's how they think about various things. But the reality is that even though I was spamming photos at some level, I actually uploaded a lot. And even though I wasn't in the game for the right reasons, Google still got a lot of work out of me. And it's fascinating to me that Google has so leveraged gamification into so much data, and they have so much confidence that they can control it. And that I played even if I played for the wrong reasons. Or maybe they were the right reasons. I don't know.
Well, you should point out what the serious point is for business owners.
Well, the serious point is that some of the images I uploaded were absolutely terrible. Meanwhile, they became profile images because those business owners had not, in fact, done due diligence and uploaded good local images. The net result was that images that I had uploaded, some of which were good, got 2 or 3 million views. One of the ones that was bad was for a Walgreens, and it's got almost 1 million views, and it was the world's worst image. It's a problem for businesses because they need to get engaged with this because it's their most visible presence on the internet. It's probably the most seen image is that profile image, and I managed to snag a couple of those spots with not very good images.
I was going to say, it sounds like not just a problem for small businesses, but enterprises as well, given your Walgreens example. And I can speak from personal experience helping our large hospital here in town, OHSU. One of their clinics, a patient uploaded a photo from the bathroom that continues to pop in and out of the primary position for a clinic. And it's a pain. And I think even... I will say it feels like it's, knock on wood, that it's a little bit stable now, and the photo that we've uploaded seems to be sticking. But you couldn't be more right that it's your GMB primary photo is the first impression that your brand receives from a lot of searchers, and you've got to make sure that you take ownership of that.
One thing that has always kind of struck me, and I've found to be kind of strange, if not kind of galling, is Google's aggressive use of gamification. I'm a local guide too, but I think I'm only a 5. I mean, I probably have dropped down below because I haven't done anything in a long time. But they're really aggressive use of gamification to incentivize people to add reviews and photos and all these modify profiles. And
answer questions.
Right, and answer questions.
With non-answers.
Precisely, but if you were a business owner, you would never be permitted to incentivize your customers to review you, enter for a chance to win, or quid pro quos, or any of that kind of stuff. So there's a total double standard going on here, and I mean Google probably can defend it in some way, but I find it just really ironic and strange.
Yeah, I mean, the legal basis is that you can't self promote, you can't incentivize reviews because it's self promotion and against truth in advertising. It's deceptive. Whereas Google is incentivizing you to leave information about other businesses where they have no interest, no self interest in that.
So I get that as a kind
I
of
agree with you.
technical legal matter, but just philosophically, it's just really sort of a double standard. It's very odd.
I mean, to me, the bigger issue is that they garner so much information. They have so much hubris. They think they can control it, and yet they never put enough intention into their algorithms to do so. So there's a lot of crap, puts a lot of the onus and the cost back either on the business or on the agency to make it right. David spent a lot of time dealing with this image. They basically are offloading, externalizing their cost for this data, and that to me is equally egregious, or maybe more.
Greg, you made a related point in our chat earlier this week that Google is continuing to prioritize sort of volume over quality, and the gamification only increases that prioritization. That they're just after more and more and more, regardless of how good or bad the contributions are.
One of the side effects, I think, of that attitude is that they let a lot of spam go through, and there was that CBC story this week about, it's one of any number of stories now about how a publication did an investigation and discovered a lot of fake reviews, and then you get the sort of standard line, well, we've removed X billion bad profiles, but it's
and the standard line also says, well, the spammer's really smart and we're constantly upgrading our systems and we think we have it under control, which is what they said to me in 2008, as I noted in that article. And they say the exact same thing in 2010, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, and so on.
Was that the infamous locksmith measles case?
No, that was Microsoft Escort case.
Ah, okay. Very good.
Yes, totally disingenuous.
That you talk about in the article, which is which is fun to read.
My closing thought on this is, if you want to be a local guide and you want to advance quickly, go read the article. I gave you some great tips how to scale your efforts efficiently. I used Google as my model, and I was able to crank out an image a minute. I was, so.
Are you still doing that?
I am not. Once I hit 7, it was clear I wasn't going to get to 8 where I live. So that's,
you're going to have to move to a more populated area, I think.
Yeah, that's going to happen.
All right. So on the theme of sort of fraud and trust, one of the things that was really interesting about Google Marketing Live, which was their ads focused event that's kind of a companion to their I/O developer conference. So I/O was last week or whenever, 2 weeks ago maybe. Who knows? The days are all bleeding together. This week, Google Marketing Live, and there were a ton of ad-related announcements, which I couldn't capture in the newsletter, but tried. They talked about commerce. They talked about a lot of new tools. There's a ton of stuff. I mean, I posted the condensed version of their keynote, which is worth watching, in the newsletter. But one of the things that was really striking to me is how privacy showed up in every one of these discussions, with the exception, I think, of Bill Reddy's shopping discussion, potentially. But it was emphasized again and again and again. And Jerry Dishler, who's their VP of ads, basically said that this implied contract of trading personal data for content, for free content, is now over. People are no longer want that bargain. And it's incumbent on everybody to recognize that and to change, and that was, it's sort of like Google gets religion, but at the same time not 100%, because they're still doing things in the background that are not consistent with that rhetoric. And Dishler's solution was basically first-party data, develop your first-party data, machine learning and automation, AI, to do predictive marketing stuff, and then Flock, right? Google's browser-based cohort group sort of targeting methodology that a lot of people are objecting to, and the byproduct of this is Google and Facebook and Amazon and some of the big players are going to be fine because they've got such end-to-end data and ecosystems. But the smaller publishers and everybody else is not going to be fine, which is partly why we're seeing the rise of subscriptions. And so this is kind of the paradox, which is that as the internet gets more privacy friendly, it reinforces the power of these big companies. And I'm going to segue into small business commerce, unless you guys want to say anything there. No, I feel like I'm giving it soliloquy.
The one observation I have is that Flock, though, appears to be dead on arrival to me.
Yeah, that's right. WordPress and Joomla, right? And maybe
a bunch of Drupal also,
which is 75% of the internet, probably right there between those three. So
default not accepted. So I don't.
Well, Google is not acknowledging that at this point, at least.
Right.
But so just real quickly on the shopping stuff, also coming out of Google Marketing Live, Google's shopping strategy continues to evolve. Google's trying to get more and more product inventory, more and more product data out there. They've opened up free distribution as part of a strategy to do that. And two of the things that were really striking to me about Bill Reddy's remarks and some of the announcements was their focus on real-time inventory and small businesses. And to that end, they've done partnerships with WooCommerce, Shopify last week, GoDaddy, and Square now, who are all going to be sort of on gatways for their small business customers to just syndicate products on Google. And
Wix, I heard today.
Yeah, Wix, all of these guys, right? And so it struck me that years ago when we all first got into this, it's services versus products, but it's still sort of true. The newspapers and traditional media companies and the Yellow Pages, these were all the big aggregators of small businesses that Google was relying upon as a kind of outsourced sales force or an outsourced kind of marketing channel to reach small businesses. And now they've really shifted to these SaaS companies, And again, it's partly about product versus services, but not entirely. These are the new aggregators for them.
I heard today that Wix has been authorized for Google's whitelisted GMB listing creation as well. So they're getting even closer with some of these platforms.
I would argue that Wix, of all of the website builders, so to speak, I know that's a gross oversimplification of their platform, but they probably have the best reach into the GMB entities that Google has the hardest time reaching in terms of very small businesses, potentially very new businesses. So that seems like a really good partnership from GMB's standpoint.
Right. One touch to create a website and get your GMB listing and to get your inventory into Merchant Center. It's compelling.
Right. And this emphasis on inventory, I think, is one of Google's big pushes. Sort of the omni-channel plus real-time inventory is a big push for them in differentiating against Amazon. And I think it does work. I think they don't have the user experience to really take on Amazon, but they certainly are getting the data there.
Their new product, though, that in restaurants that does the order entry has a great user interface. So clearly they know how to do it. You start ordering a product and it makes suggestions on which other foods to order with it, and then it takes you through a very painless checkout and payment process. They've inserted themselves so elegantly into this that it's quite amazing. So they do know how to do it, and we are seeing that start.
Well, that's a metaphor for their entire strategy, right? I mean, they're trying to simplify distribution and reach, and there's everything is kind of a mirror of everything else. There's a way in which they're at the highest level. There's a consistency to what they're doing.
I would simplify it one step further. They want to become a rentier of all transactions in the local world.
Yes. Agree.
Great. I'll take the segue, Greg, at this point, and move into a couple of news items. But before I do that, I think that your positioning of the sort of, Yellow Pages in the mid 2000s, say, and now it's these sort of scaled SaaS platforms. That Google is eager to partner with them, I think, has been the case, kind of all the way along when it comes to reselling Google Ads or getting information, out of these companies' customer bases. I think the difference is, unlike the Yellow Pages, these SaaS companies that Google is partnering with have a much more defensible position, that there's not really the same kind of end around that there could have been with Google Ads and the Yellow Pages, several years ago. It's not like Google Merchant Center is displacing the like table stakes necessity of managing online inventory in your Shopify website, or your or the table availability in your Talk Squarespace platform. So I think that these SaaS companies have a much more defensible business position than the Yellow Pages and arguably the media companies did in the first wave of this in the late 2000s. So that was interesting to me, Greg, to hear that positioning. The segue is, we saw Klaviyo this week raised, I don't know what it was, even hundreds of millions more dollars in funding.
I think it was like
$320 million, right?
Something.
This is a week after Active raised a very similar number, and we saw MailChimp this week come out with at least it was new to me, and I follow MailChimp relatively closely, the ability to make online ordering and appointment scheduling through MailChimp. So would
you tell listeners what Klaviyo is or does?
So Klaviyo, so that's what I was getting there. Good segue again, Mike. So it strikes me that these SaaS platforms are really becoming sort of all-in-one operations and marketing automation, which is how I would describe Klaviyo, as essentially marketing automation for e-commerce, and that they're almost like we've at least some of us have talked for years about the need for SMBs to implement some sort of CRM, whether that's just a spreadsheet or through a complex system like HubSpot. And it strikes me that these platforms are kind of going around the need for a traditional CRM by just starting with the very base, in MailChimp's case, in Klaviyo's case, and Shopify by default, and other e-commerce platforms. You're getting their customer information as a starting point and then building out features from there, as opposed to the other way around.
And Square's been doing that for a long time.
Square's doing the same thing. So it's just a really interesting time. We're sort of seeing the traditional website builders move into sort of operations and automation. We're seeing email marketing providers like MailChimp and ActiveCampaign moving more into websites and operations. And it just feels like, and we're seeing that investors are kind of buying the story as well, with the hundreds of millions of dollars flowing in. So I think it's an interesting time. And I think, as I said, unlike the Yellow Pages days that you highlighted, I think all of these companies have built pretty good products with a compelling value prop. And I think the differentiation is going to be really the hard part for all these companies, because the feature sets are largely available in all these platforms.
I like to think about it as sort of pre-sale, discovery, in-store operations, and then post-sale customer relations follow-up. And you're right, all those areas, whether they started with operations and moved out to marketing and follow-up, or started in follow-up like email and then moved out to marketing, they're all taking on many more functions.
Well, I mean, it's interesting, because in general, I think that small businesses, to paint with a broad brush, would prefer to work, I mean, this is what the survey data reflect, would prefer to work with fewer rather than more companies. So they don't want a bunch of point solutions. So some of this evolution is responding to that perceived demand. Also, to create more value, so retention is, churn is harder. It's a very, I mean, there's a much longer discussion about sort of the evolution of the small business SaaS marketplace, but it's really fascinating. I think some of the big money coming at these companies is post-COVID. Now everybody buys e-commerce or digital commerce, and so people are scrambling for providers, and the market sort of perceives a much larger opportunity now, I think, than in the past.
And I think you're right. Just to close, I think you're absolutely right. Obviously, the surveys, for as long as we've all been in this business, have shown the preference for working with a single vendor. I think the difference is, historically, point solutions have been so much better breed than the all-in-one offerings have been, you would have been shooting yourself in the foot to choose a substandard all-in-one package. And now we're seeing, I mean, pretty much every company I just mentioned has a really great best-of-breed solution that is now available as an all-in-one. So I think that's the difference. And to some extent, the funding from these huge venture rounds has enabled these companies to invest in their product to that extent. So
That seems like a very optimistic close.
I would agree. Greg, are you happy with that?
Yes, I'm happy with that. So
All right.
we can close on that upbeat note. But anyway, as always, thank you for listening. Give us feedback and suggestions about how we can make what we're doing more interesting or more useful to you. And have a good weekend, week, whatever it is for you. Thanks for joining David, Mike, and Greg. To stay on top of the latest developments in local, subscribe to our newsletter at nearmedia.co. We'll see you next week.